Well, good morning once again. It's good to be here. So far, we've been talking a lot about money, about growth, about opportunities, but I think everyone knows that does not happen by accident. Leadership is a big part of that component, of that ingredient list. So our conversation, our discussion today is going to be pretty defined. How will the new Asia define financial leadership? And we have panelists who are on the front lines of decision making as far as information gathering, making tough decisions. Some quick introductions. Nicolas Aguzin, we know you very well from here in Hong Kong. I do see you many mornings as I'm getting ready, offering your commentary, so it's good to see you in person. Happy to welcome Dr. Victor Fung, Chairman of Fung Investments. David Liao is the co-CEO of HSBC, based here in Asia Pacific, and XD Yang, Managing Director and Chairman of Carlyle Asia. Good to see all of you. Nicolas, I'm going to start with you. This is your home territory, the exchange, so to speak. Look, you know how business is done, whether it's an IPO, whether it's through a trade deal. I'm wondering, when we look at financial leadership, are there some new tools, some new platforms that may not be getting the headlines, but that you observe that are very pivotal in determining how deals are made and how the economy moves?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Marc. Let me say that when thinking about the new things and the new approach to doing business and the financial sector in Asia, and for all participants that have an interest in participating in the markets, there's a few things that I think are important to take into account. The first one is the changing geopolitical landscape that is going on around, and how there's a shift in economic and global geopolitical power coming a little more towards the east. So Asia is representing a bigger proportion of the world as we go forward. I'm sure Victor is going to talk a lot about that because this is an area that he focuses quite a bit. But that does create an environment where people need to recalibrate their portfolios, think about how they invest in the context of geopolitics. And just like the exchange, for example, we've created some specific connectivity tools to connect with the market onshore. So we have something that is called Stock Connect that allows investors through Hong Kong to invest directly in the mainland, and the other way around. Investors from the mainland to start investing overseas through Hong Kong. So that's like an innovation that we started actually in 2014, and it's been evolving and getting better and better year after year. And this is important because you're creating a single liquidity pool. But that's just like one of the things. Besides that, capital formation around the world is also changing quite a bit. And what we're seeing is that local exchanges in each of the jurisdictions, and Saudi Arabia is a great example, they're also becoming more relevant. Companies want to be in their local markets. And from our point, what we've been doing is trying to generate the partnerships with those local exchanges. So we had an agreement, an MOU with Tadawul, and we actually recognize them as an exchange. Same thing with Indonesia. I mean, you may have read that, Indonesia has made a partnership with us. So it's not only the mainland, it's also Southeast Asia, it's the Middle East. And finally, and it'll be the topic of the day, fintech, all the innovation around financial markets, how you access the market. That constantly is evolving, and it's very, very important because today, it takes a long time to settle our transactions, and it's done, in a very antiquated fashion. That will evolve. We just last week we launched FINI, which lowered the settlement cycle of IPOs from 5 days to 2 days, but still a long way to go. And when we look at the market in 10 years, it's going to be quite a bit different.
Right, and things are so instantaneous with trading. Victor, I want to turn to you. I know you have such enthusiasm for Asia and the growth and the different developments that are coming from here. We were talking a lot about financial tools, but I know something that you are very passionate about is trade. Tell me why trade is so important.
Well, thank you very much, Marc. It's a great honor and pleasure to be here. Just to follow on this whole issue, I think the most important thing that we really want to keep in mind is that the economic center of gravity of the world is moving towards Asia. Asia today accounts for about 36% of global GDP, all the forecasts I can get my hands on would predict that half of the world's GDP will be in Asia. So this shift is absolutely crucial and something to keep in mind when you look at the whole issue. Now, if you delve a little deeper, all this is enabled really by trade. Trade is the ingredient that actually really mobilizes the economy, and also all the developing economies of the world are very reliant on trade to develop themselves. Now, today, trade is more than 50% of global GDP, and it will remain that way or maybe even increase over time. And I think Asia is actually very ready to enable this, because we have just created last year one of the most, in fact, I think it's the largest free trade agreement in the world, called the RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, that involves 15 countries in Asia, and it composes of a third of the world's people, about a third of the world's GDP, and about a third of the world's trade. Now, this particular very inclusive and open regionalism sort of free trade agreement is going to enable Asia to continue growing. However, there is one issue, and that issue is, I think, it's trade finance. We now are facing a huge gap in the trade finance. As we all know, 80% plus of the world's trade is enabled by trade finance. You need trade finance to lubricate trade. We are now facing a trade finance gap of $2.5 trillion based on the last ADB report earlier this year. And that is going to be increasing. I think we've really got to focus on that, and that's really where I would suggest that Hong Kong has a central role to play. We are really at the center of orchestrating a lot of the global supply chains, especially in this region. We are an international finance center. You put the two things together, we are actually an ideal place to be the trade finance center for Asia and really help close this trade finance gap. I think that's really something that we can very practically work on and would actually give Hong Kong and Asia a leadership role in the world.
Yes, you have ports, which is a very valuable commodity. David, I want to turn to you. I often say that bankers are some of the most well-informed people in the world. And the reason is, quite frankly, you have to be when it comes to making key decisions. And right now, Nicolas talks about the geopolitical challenges. Interest rates. I just returned from the United States. It's a big issue there. We have seen the conversation in the EU. When we have these headwinds, these barriers, what advice do you give, especially from a leadership role, to whether it be a corporation, individual investors, governments? I mean, these are some very strong, volatile forces, and making decisions during these tough times, are a big pillar of leadership.
It is indeed, but it's a pleasure to be here, to be connected with colleagues and partners to go through these opportunities and challenges together. I think the first thing, for whether you're working in a bank or anywhere else, is to really know the times. And it's, as Victor and Gucho mentioned, Asia really is exemplifying growth, and we can see that in the future. I mean, it's the apportioning of GDP is getting higher. It's accelerating faster than the rest of global growth. Consumption at 18 trillion is already higher than in US in aggregate. It's twice the size of Europe. We're seeing not just connectivity outside of Asia, but inside Asia, it's intertwining closer and closer together. And that goes through the ups and downs of challenge, whether it's through COVID or geopolitics, etc. It has brought a more equitable diversion of capital. It was so galvanized towards Hong Kong and China prior, but now we're getting some of the +1, which is extremely healthy. For the rest of the region. And the question to your point is how to bank that. And I think, yes, HSBC's home is from here, is from Shanghai, and we remain to be significantly scalable here. But it's also important to go with the times, to connect with the rest of Asia, but also to connect with the rest of the world. As Victor mentioned, trade hasn't decreased despite any sort of hits that's been thrown at it, whether it's COVID or geopolitics, etc. That conversation with the world has to continue. Now, the expression can be one way or another. You spoke about financial leadership, but the fact is that dollar remains to be the most sizable expression of finance globally and even in Asia. There's much work to do for renminbi to play a healthy role. I mean, it's the second largest economy and the first biggest trader, but it's now just increasing to 3.6% of payments, and US dollar is almost 47%. So, we first need to know the opportunities and then setting trajectories on what we can grow to. Tons of activities and initiatives done by the stock exchange or in Hong Kong and bringing capital intra-Asia as well as Asia with the rest of the world, and we're keen to play a part in that. And that's probably why HSBC is structured, even when we have an Asia story, always globally.
So we've talked about trade, we've talked about innovation. Let's also talk about the consumer. And XD, we were talking just before our conversation here about the power and the value of the consumer here in Asia. Not only are consumers just buying things, but in many ways, consumers are taking a leadership role in changing the way practices and businesses operate. And you had some interesting examples. I'd like for you to talk about that real briefly, if you could.
Yes, Mark. I think historically, when people think about Asia, people talk about Asia consumption. A lot of the theory is as the economy grow, wealth grow, per capita GDP grow, therefore consumption grow. But what has really changed in the last decade, because of the digitalization of the economies, of the consumers, so what's really happening is that the Asian consumers are literally changing how businesses are run, or what business should be, or what business should look like. I give you an example. As many of you know, we bought the McDonald's China business. In 6 years, now the customer base went from virtually 0 to 90% on the digital platform, right? So that itself changed a lot of our business, how we think about how to reach that consumer and what have you. But what's more important, what people don't see, is the investment in digital in these companies really kind of changed the capabilities of this company and how we run our business. Take as an example, staffing. We have 160,000 employees. So managing that is critical. So when you have this digital capability, the team is able to use AI technology to help the restaurant managers to forecast what's their really need for labor, so they can staff their people better. And that has never really happened before. So the other thing is, like, we're opening like 1,000 restaurants a year. And just to give you a people sense what that means, and this really doesn't happen anywhere else in the world, is that there are over 200,000 decisions to be made on how to build this 1,000 restaurants. Forget about running them, right? So you can see that without technology, you can't really bring your business to that level of scale and sophistication. So I think this is where really that whether it's the company in China or India or other part of Asia, how they change their businesses, that's really leading the world.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting, predicting what the consumer even wants next. No, it's very fascinating. As we are dealing with pressures from the clock, Nicolas, I want to go back to China because I've recently moved to Beijing. I was there for the Belt and Road Initiative, but we also have other partnerships, if you will, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and such. Mm-hmm. When we talk about growth in Asia, how important are these alliances? Are they truly necessary, or will we see even more cooperative arrangements form? Tell me your thoughts on that.
So, I mean, I just published a blog on the HKEX website. You can get it. I mean, we call it the diagonal of growth. I mean, which talks about, an area that starts in China, goes through Southeast Asia, India, Middle East, being a little bit in the middle of like northwest and east, north, south, and east, west, and continuing Africa and Latin America. If you think about this region, the GDP per capita is about $7,000 versus about 80 in the US. And not that we should eliminate any one region or anything, but I do believe if you look at that area has all the natural resources, middle class, food, energy, water that you need. I mean, Richard this morning was saying that, the demand of water will surpass the supply of water by 40% in the next 10, 20 years. Well, I mean, if you have like the combination Brazil, Indonesia, where you have like not only copper, nickel, iron ore, I mean, water, biodiversity, but plus you also have the middle class, a huge middle class, all the population growth of Africa, and the technology, infrastructure investments capability from China, plus the financing power of all that, all those funds looking for investments opportunity, both in the Middle East. Remember, Middle East today has just the sovereign wealth funds, it's about $4 trillion. And you combine that with all the capital from China that has not been, going outwards as much, and the potential of that capital financing all these opportunities around the world, it just creates such an immense opportunity. Think about, with today's technology, that GDP per capita going just like doubling, it would be so massive. And today, 70% of the global growth come from this region. So I do think that beyond the labels of BRI or like Global South, it's just like this area that has like a great complementarity. It complements very, very well. It can be done today. So I think it's incredibly important to think about this region.
Sure. We just have a moment or two left. David, I just want to turn to you real quickly. Obviously, businesses need money to do different projects and such. And there's this whole idea of the innovation economy. Tell me what is being done to make sure that the funds are essentially available for this next generation of innovation and innovators.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think it's critical that we work harder to get that capital allocation right to the right creativity. As we've seen on the opportunities in Asia, XD clearly does a big part of that outside of the bank. But I think banks are coming really into a timely play to run the holistic journey to walk through. Firstly, democratizing creativity to as many people as possible. So we start early with, as you know, we've just launched innovation banking following the acquisition of the UK SVB. It's timely now, more so than before, in terms of being able to assume that capital strength and deliver that to the region and help new businesses come through. They are coming faster than ever. I know if you look at the stats now that some of the valuation has come off quite a bit, some 30% in terms of exit, and deals has come off 44%. But it also clears out the tall trees for new creativity to come through. XD talked about McDonald's, which is most traditional business, but yet digital comes through with that. So we have a $3 billion GBA technology fund that's coming through. Technology would seep invariably through into sustainability, and that's a huge topic for Asia to get transition right. So I think the bank is front and center on that and quite serious about it.
Sure. Unfortunately, just like CNN, I have to monitor the time, and this is no exception. The good news is you're all here in Hong Kong, and I know you talk with each other, and hopefully our audience will be able to as well. Thank you. This was an eclectic conversation. Really appreciate it. Another topic we want to cover, though, is what's being called hyper tech. And I want to welcome Mr. Eugene Tang, the business journalist for the South China Morning Post, and his panelists to the stage, and to my panelists here. Thank you so much. It was great to talk to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.